So we believe that in the next few years, there's going to be trillions of things, not billions, but there's going to be trillions of things out there, little chips embedded into plastics, embedded into literally everything around you. Today, we have this huge network all around the world. It's close to 100,000 daily active. It's about 1 million users. But we have this huge base of smartphones that are contributing to the Nodle network. We were even talking to the military, and the military doesn't even know what sensor data is hitting them is authentic. And we just started to realize that, hey, maybe this could be a problem. So we expect this to be a massive sector growing in the next couple of years. And it's really just the beginning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN Podcast. My name is Tyler. I am your host, and I'm really excited for this next conversation. We're joined by Garrett. He is the co-founder of Nodle. Garrett, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. We get the chance to chat with you a little bit about DePIN, just to go over everything that you're doing in the space. So maybe for context, background, can you just share with folks who you are, how you got here, and we'll kick it off from there?
Yeah, so my name is Garrett Kinsman, co-founder of Nodle. Misha, who's my other co-founder in the project, along with Elliot, I've known Misha for 10 years now. I moved out to San Francisco when I was about 16 because I was super interested in mesh networks. At the time, we were building an app called FireChat, which used smartphones to create a decentralized physical infrastructure for sending messages. At the time, DePIN wasn't a word. Ethereum wasn't even around. It was just Bitcoin, a bunch of mesh people, and a bunch of anarchists. Really, it was a really interesting space. And so over the past several years, we've seen it evolve. I've worked on different projects around hardware. I spent 2 years in India doing hardware at the competitor to Uber, a company called Ola. And then Misha and I joined back together at the end of 2017 to build Nodle. So we've been always very interested in decentralized and mesh and wireless and things like that.
What was your first kind of introduction to crypto? Because you guys were DePIN before DePIN was a thing. How did you, was it Bitcoin? What kind of got you into this crypto space?
It was really friends in high school, to be honest. I kind of hung out with all of the kids that didn't really fit in, the nerdy kids, and they were all messing around with the deep web and all that types of stuff. So that was really my first exposure. It was literally in high school, 2011 or 12, people messing around with the deep web. And I said, wow, this is interesting. The user experience is horrible. And when I moved to San Francisco, I got connected to a lot of the mesh people. Naturally, they were all really into Bitcoin. At that point, I'd given up on it because the user experience was just too poor. I said, I'm somebody that's pretty intelligent. For me, it's really hard to use this stuff. So even back then, we experimented with some ways like physical Bitcoins and playing around with ways to make it easier for people. And it wasn't really until last year where the technology existed, especially with Ethereum layer 2s, where you could have account abstractions, you could pay transactions for other people in a really efficient manner. And so it really took 10 or 15 years to get to the point where just technologically you can make crypto easy for everybody.
Yeah, it's certainly been one of those pain points from the user experience side over the years, and trying to onboard people into these things like wallets and seed phrases and all this crap. It's just a nightmare.
Yeah, and if you download Nodle or Click, we try to make it super easy, like something that anybody can use and enjoy and benefit from this power of decentralization.
I have the app running. I am a user. It is great. It is very seamless.
Thank you.
What was your initial interest or introduction to the mesh networking side? Like, how did you talked about this app that you guys built, the chat app. Yeah. What was the initial aha moment that got you thinking about this concept of mesh networks that I'm sure eventually turned into what you're building today? Where did that initial genesis come from?
So it really came from high school and the frustration with using the cellular networks. Just seeing how much it costs to have a cell phone plan, the quality, the monopolies in the space. And I said, there really has to be a better way. And that's when I started finding out about people that were just building mesh networks in cities, on rooftops. There's a famous one in the Himalayas. When I moved to San Francisco, I got a rooftop mesh network called Monkey Brains. And I met with the guys for coffee. I must have been 18, sitting there with coffee. And they said, you got to meet this guy in the Himalayas who's building mesh networks in the Himalayas. And I actually went to India. I met with the guy in Dharamshala, and the guy had been invited by the Dalai Lama, or at least this is what he told me. He'd been invited by the Dalai Lama to go build mesh networks in the Himalayas, and they built a company called Air Jaldi, and that's headquartered in the same town where the Dalai Lama lives. So it was always this exploration of saying, wow, how can we use these decentralized networks in different ways to provide a basic service, internet, to people that need it the most. And how can we use that to free information? I learned almost everything I know just really on YouTube and Wikipedia, just learning from stuff, and now using ChatGPT. I never really had a formal college, education.
So fascinating. Could think about mesh networks that the Dalai Lama had asked for, wanted to build. That's a very interesting story.
He's a smart guy. So the company is called Air Jaldi, and they've built a really nice WISP architecture up in the Himalayas, arguably in some of the most difficult environments to build internet. Now we're seeing Starlink really come in and take over a lot of that space. If you look at from a network standpoint, ground-based mesh networks, especially in really high-density urban populations, is the way to go. And now we're seeing Helium and XNet and other companies really lead the high bandwidth space of that, and we've focused down on the low bandwidth, ambient IoT type space.
That's fascinating. So you had these kind of unique events, if you want to call them that. How did that transition to building Nodle? Like, what was the initial genesis of that side of the project after you did the chat app?
So came back to San Francisco, literally landed at SFO, and Misha calls me and says, Garrett, come to this co-working space. I'm working on this new idea. And it was based on a lot of what we'd learned at FireChat, what worked, what didn't work. And the problem was with FireChat, we built these mesh networks that would spring open and then they would disappear. And this was because they just didn't have the incentive after. And so the mesh networks were like a spark. It was like a fire, and then they would disappear. And crypto had been entering the scene, and we said, wow, can we use this network with a crypto incentive to pay people to keep these mesh networks active? And then can we use, instead of messaging, which at the time had become free, can we use IoT and connectivity as a demand side to create demand for these types of networks?
That's so interesting. What are the types of IoT devices that you are bringing into the network?
Today in 2024, it's still very early. It's almost purely asset tracking. So people wanting to be able to locate. Right now we have a partnership. One of our largest customers is in France. It's a company called Rule, and they're using our network to track stolen vehicles. And now we're looking to bring some of this technology into the US to just really give you an idea of how you're driving. If your car gets stolen, where did it end up? And create just a better level of knowledge for these insurance companies. And the same thing's being done in Africa for motorcycles. So a really interesting insurance kind of fintech play for asset tracking. But ultimately, it's going to be anything, smart metering, just a next level of sensors that you can only get with the cost of Bluetooth.
Yeah, that's the power of these kind of these high band or low bandwidth, but these cheap networks that you're able to leverage from just like the application with the customer that you have in France. Are you building the actual devices that would go on to a truck, for example, that you'd want to track, or how are you actually doing the tracking side within your mesh network?
We use any type of Bluetooth device. In the case with France, they're providing their own devices. We have spoken with a lot of different hardware manufacturers. We even are working on an open source nanocomputer design. I don't know if you saw that, which is the idea that Bluetooth technology can now be printed. And so we're on the second iteration of that. We would love to build a third iteration. It's very expensive to build these things. But if you look at where hardware is going, where mass manufacturing is going, even where solar power and battery technology is going, it's all printed.
Right.
So you have printed circuit boards. You have a single chip that you stick on that board. You have printed solar panels using gallium-based chemistry. And then you have printed batteries, which are running on a nickel chemistry. And you have something now that you can mass manufacture. So we believe the theoretical cost of some of these, it's not really a Bluetooth chip. It's more like a mini computer. It's something that would look like a Raspberry Pi is going to be pennies. It's just going to be really the cost of the materials and the manufacturing. And it's going to be insanely cheap. So we believe that in the next few years, there's going to be trillions of things, not billions, but there's going to be trillions of things out there, little chips embedded into plastics, embedded into literally everything around you. We're going to be immersed in this digital world of hyper connectivity. And we need to make sure, one, that there's a security layer that can secure all this stuff and make sure that this is a world that we want to live in. We believe blockchain is perfect for that. Actually, blockchain is the best tool for that. And then we want to help be the wireless network that can help connect and bridge all these things. And we think Bluetooth is really the best protocol for that, at least to initiate some of these connections. So
Yeah, just thinking about Bluetooth, is this something you can share for folks that are understanding the technical differences? You've got these different types of wireless connectivity for things like when you're tracking a vehicle, for example. What is the kind of the distance, like how physically close do access points or nodes need to be with respect to whatever they're tracking or connecting to on the other side?
Bluetooth right now can go like 30 or 40 meters generally. The idea is you have a lot of phones, and it's a bit counterintuitive. Like people would say, oh, you need LoRa or a cellular. But the reality is that the cost is the most important factor of these things. So if we can have a lot of nodes, and there's a lot of smartphones out there, if we can have a lot of nodes, it's really the cost of the hardware and the service which becomes the most important. And Bluetooth by far blows everybody out of the water. So it's Bluetooth is shorter range, but we're actually working with some people now that are looking to do longer range communications, even up to the kilometers, like tens of kilometers.
Wow.
And so,
all via Bluetooth, or is this a new wireless?
It's like a Bluetooth long range. And there's even some new kind of specs being written that can run on a regular Bluetooth chip that can go super long range. And that actually opens up the possibility to do orbital communications with a chip that costs 40 cents or 50 cents on a stick. So this is the world that we are in right now. It's a matter of scaling this up, building a business around it. But we think that, again, we're entering this age of hyperconnectivity. I was even deep in the mountains a couple weeks ago sending a satellite message on my phone for free. And that's like normal now. That's just the world we live in. So I think there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to come in the future.
So what does that mean for consumers with the orbital communication, being able to have devices that can connect kilometers apart from one another? What does that translate into?
Apple, like, I don't know if you tried the satellite service on the iPhone, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
It works. I was chatting just like normal, sending emojis and liking messages and stuff way back in the Sierra Mountains. And so I think we're going to enter an age where you're never going to be without service. You know, that excuse, sorry, my call's dropping, I got to go. Like that just it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
But it also means that the cost of acquisition of data is going to go down like crazy.
Sure.
If you want to go out and capture weather data or sensor data, it's really going to drop.
Yeah. I think it's going to be the future that everybody wants, because everybody knows how painful it has been in the past without having connectivity in places. Let's talk about the supply side a little bit. As you're building up these mesh networks, what's Nodle's approach for actually creating the physical footprint and the infrastructure? Obviously, there's the app. Can you talk through how you guys are creating the supply side there?
It's a basic crypto incentivized wireless network. We were the first to do that. Obviously, there's been many more people after that. Some have done a really incredible job. And it's very simple. You run an app on your phone, you earn some crypto, you download the Nodle app. It's our intention that the demand is really backed by real customers using this network. So today we have this huge network all around the world, close to 100,000 daily active. We say it's about 1 million users. It varies based on the seasons. But we have this huge base of smartphone users that are contributing to the Nodle network. We realize that beyond just asset tracking, we can use this network to verify reality. And this is something that's really interesting, is that we obviously were, at the beginning, tons of people try to fake and hack the network. And we've always been aiming towards what would the perfect trustless reward mechanism look like for a wireless network. And what we're very quickly moving towards is this idea that we can use this wireless network to prove reality. So you can think of smartphones as these nodes. You can think of IoT customers like almost like an oracle. These are people that are paying to go connect devices. And ideally in the future, these devices will digitally sign things. And now we can use this network to actually verify things like data that's on a smartphone. And what we've ended up with now, what we've been focusing a lot of effort on, is this idea of using the Nodle network and the Nodle infrastructure to prove images, videos, documents, to prove that they're authentic. This is how we launched the Click product at the end of last year, focused on this need to really prove what's real and to fight against generative AI media.
That's such a big problem everybody's starting to realize with all the deep fakes and everything out there. It's really fascinating. So you guys can essentially attest to either a photo or a video being taken in a certain place, and you're able to use the device data, and you can maybe attest to that on chain. Is that how you're leveraging?
Right now, the Nodle network is live. The Click infrastructure is live, and we're in testing now. How do we build that proof between the two? A lot of this work is based on what we did during COVID and the idea of a contact tracing protocol. And the key here is, how do you build it in a way that's secure and isn't going to impact privacy? Because if you look at what was done during COVID, it was designed to figure out who interacted with who.
Right.
And we want to do that in a much more secure fashion. Say, just do a digital proof that you interact with this device and this device is real. And there's a lot happening with ZK. It's a really exciting space. It's still early, but we believe that this can generate a very profound, very secure proof of reality.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you're right. This is the best application or the best technology for fulfilling that application, being able to leverage in on-chain attestation. Obviously, the ZK stuff is super interesting. Clearly, privacy is an important part of your guys' process. How else are you bringing that privacy layer to the forefront with Nodle?
So a key is like just the way we build our apps. So we don't take email. We don't want your phone number. And beyond that, it's really just blockchain is the best way to protect privacy. Like we use blockchain as the root of trust. And we've been pushing really hard with the Adobe C2PA group. So C2PA is this new standard set about, it's being adopted by Google and OpenAI and everybody to digitally sign and attest that media is authentic and images and documents and things like that. The problem is it's all built on a centralized certificate architecture, which doesn't scale. It's buggy as hell. It's super expensive, and it can be backdoored and censored. And so we really believe that blockchain is the best way to do that, just from a scalability standpoint, but also from a civilizational security standpoint. We believe that civilization needs a fundamental primitive to prove what's real and what's not real. And we believe fundamentally the root of trust for that should not be some company in Washington, D.C. It should be a decentralized blockchain that is really hard to attack.
I couldn't agree more with your approach to thinking through that. There's so many kind of applications that you're able to leverage with the Nodle network. Obviously, you guys have the mesh network and you can do things like tracking with vehicles. And then you've got what you're talking about, these proofs that are for other applications like with media and photos. Are there other things or applications that you're looking at potentially bringing in from a potential product offering in the future that you're able to talk about at all?
So I'd say we're really focused on iterating on IoT, really scaling up that business, and then just around authenticity. And that already with Click is already a pretty large and encompassing product. So we have the Click camera app, which is a very simple camera app that we actually have photojournalists using right now. We have somebody in Lebanon that's shooting pictures of airstrikes. These are the first cryptographically certified images coming out of a war zone of any consumer app. Any consumer app, really. We're also building on, we had a partnership with Vivendi, which is using this Click suite of tools to sign press releases. And then beyond that, we've been doing a lot of work around signing like computer vision data and machine data. I'm really interested in using Click to sign that computer vision data for robotics or autonomous systems is authentic. We've even been having discussions with very critical, like high security machinery, think energy plants, big energy generators and things like that, and using our system to secure the data that's coming off of these things. So we want to be able to secure any type of image, documents, data that focuses around mission critical applications. There's a lot that can be done there. The trick is focusing down on the first few customer use cases that can bring revenues for the network and for the lab. We're always in constant iteration and improvement and trying to just build a better product for people to use on the ground.
It's just incredible to think about the fact that you're able to verifiably prove that you've got photos coming out of these war zones. Obviously, you see these crazy stories that go on Twitter or whatever, where it was a fake photo and they're pushing a story and everybody buys into it because it looks like it's legit. That's incredible. And the other thing I was going to mention is that anybody who's ever submitted a press release, they don't actually verify that you are who you are with the company or whatever. Anybody can just basically say, I'm this person from X company, and that is what it is, and it goes out. So the fact that you're able to leverage this technology and be able to prevent those types of things from happening, that's really awesome.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And here in the US, it's just starting to become part of the mind sphere, the meme sphere, but it's literally. But in Europe, this has been a real problem. There's been companies, there was one company called Vinci Autoroutes, where somebody created a fake press release and it impacted their stock price quite heavily. And so a lot of European companies saw that and they realized there's a need. And that's why we're seeing a lot of interest in Europe. It's fascinating. We think of, as an American, we have certain premonitions about Europe. Many of them are totally incorrect. And you realize that when it comes to things like digital documents, digital identity, there's some really cutting edge stuff coming out of Europe, and they're really leading that. Like Europe's mandating digital trade documents. There's even some work being done now on portable identity. So being able to move identity between different systems. It's really exciting stuff coming out of Europe. We're just going to see this stuff work its way into every facet of our life.
Oh, without question. Yeah, I was going to mention there's a comedian actually who has these bits where he essentially pretends to be a journalist. He'll get companies like Tesla or SpaceX or whatever to respond back to him. He'll just write these super silly articles of people like, there was one where he said people are eating rocks on Mars. That's what Elon said they were going to do. And they were responding to him like, I don't think Elon ever said this. He would Photoshop all these different snapshots of the webpage. He basically would trick their PR team into thinking that these things are real. Being able to prevent against that, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many different applications. Where else are you looking at iterating within the kind of types of verifications?
We're really focused on just building out this click ecosystem and improving that, and just getting people to use it, getting photojournalists to use it, getting people that are pushing the limits of photography, because we believe that's really critical for everything that's happening today between elections. Just a few days before the election right now, I'm sure many people who are watching this, the election will already have happened, but it's a totally fascinating time in history where more images were generated with AI in just over a year than were generated in the entire history of photography. And that's not a linear growth curve. That's an exponential growth curve. And so we don't know what's real or fake anymore. Companies, when you're ingesting data, there's no proof that this is real. We were even talking to the military, and the military doesn't even know what sensor data is hitting them is authentic. And so it's just nobody has any clue what's real or fake anymore. And we just started to realize, hey, maybe this could be a problem. So we expect this to be a massive sector growing in the next couple of years. And it's really just the beginning. It's super early for all of this stuff. So the main focus right now is just getting this in the hands of people, seeing how this can help our existing customers in the insurance and the fintech space, and grow Web3 really into a real business. If you look at DePIN as a whole, I think I was at the DePIN conference in New York, which was a ton of fun. And they said that DePIN as a whole, like the largest company in the DePIN space today, is only making about $1 million a year, which is tiny.
It's peanuts.
We want to help be the company that grows that sector significantly.
How much of your future revenue do you predict coming from kind of these fintech tracking applications within the mesh network versus verifying photography or other types of data? Can you speculate a little bit with us where you think that's going to go?
I see most of the growth for the Nodle network coming from verified data. So images, documents, data like computer vision data. I see that as a massive growth sector. Interesting enough, though, we are seeing the IoT stuff grow. We're having a lot of people, most interesting in just wild parts of the world, Brazil, Africa, Asia, become really in asset tracking and deploying these things. So that is growing, but I believe that fighting against AI and generative AI is just going to become a huge issue. And that's going to be the biggest growth part. And anybody can take part of that just by running the Nodle app and being part of this network to connect and verify reality.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good call to action. We do have your guys' Nodle app linked on our DePIN Pulse site, which is our tracking for getting involved with different DePIN opportunities. Like I said, I'm a current user. It is great to have the app running on your phone. Gosh, Garrett, we talked about so many different things. Was there anything else we didn't get a chance to cover that you think is relevant for folks to know and stay updated with respect to Nodle?
So I would say that there's something interesting that's happening with DePIN now. There's a lot of cool stuff happening with energy that we're seeing. So people deploying decentralized energy products, that was the big topic of conversation in the past big DePIN conference in New York. We're focused really on verifying data. We think there's a lot of intersections with proving energy and proving that things are real. We're having a lot of conversations now with big major companies that want to track things like petrochemicals and energy credits. And I would say that it's really starting to hit mainstream. Like this fear of blockchain that big companies had is starting to go away. So like many companies that deployed a private blockchain, they realized that a private blockchain is useless. It's just added complexity for zero gain. And now we have a lot of discussions with people. And when before they said, okay, why blockchain? Now they start to get it. They start to understand that there's a real value to have a decentralized root of trust that can't be modified. And so I'd say it's really early, but we're going to see a lot of exciting stuff coming in the next couple of years.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And you're spot on with sort of the lack of value with a lot of the private blockchains that you saw. Interesting enough, one of the projects that we had on earlier was a project called Glow. and their CEO, they're doing the decentralized energy specifically around carbon credits. One of the things that he told me that
Yeah.
was news to me was there is an incredible amount of fraud in the carbon
Oh
credit
yeah.
space. And so being able to
Yeah.
validate that information or location and all this other kind of stuff is a real problem. I think he said something like 85% of the carbon credits that are created are fraudulent in terms of what they share, what they include. And so that's a huge number, and it creates a tax on people that are ultimately paying for these things, right? And so that externality, if you can cut down on any fraction of that, it's going to move the needle significantly.
Yeah, it's a super fascinating space. Yeah, DePIN is just getting started. That was the biggest takeaway that I got from the EV3 conference in New York was it's so early for this stuff. It is a tiny sector that is really just starting to ramp up, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. I think we're seeing just really interesting stuff come out of this. And we're actually seeing now in Asia, a lot of Chinese companies, they're launching hardware as a DePIN first product, which is interesting. Like really beautifully made like weather sensors and just all of the wild Shenzhen-esque hardware that is just beautifully designed and has a million features. It is launching DePIN first. And so that's a really interesting trend also.
Are you guys looking at potentially partnering or working with other projects in terms of being able to validate? Like you mentioned some of these use cases within the energy space, but are there other DePIN projects that you're specifically interested in working with, that you're able to share at all?
So we've had a lot of discussions. I don't think any of that we can announce, but there's a few companies just focused on actually deploying base stations just to prove what's happening. And some of these base stations have Bluetooth. We've talked a lot with the decentralized wireless network providers to help validate base stations. So we think the Nodle network is a really powerful fleet of devices that we can use to validate other people's networks. We also just announced a partnership with Accurast, which is really interesting. And the idea that you can use the compute on smartphones actually as critical infrastructure. And this is something that people have told us for years. They said, this is impossible. You can't do that. You can't coordinate enough phones. And I said, well, yeah, it's impossible now, but obviously there's a way to do it. Distributed compute has been around for a long time. As a side note, one of the pioneering projects for this was the SETI at home, which was in the late 90s, where you could allocate some of your PC power for decoding, doing signal processing. In particular case of doing signal processing to hunt for intelligent extraterrestrial life. But that was something where we had a crazy use case that pioneered decentralized compute. And we said, man, this is totally going to be possible on smartphones. And now that application developers are moving towards a serverless architecture, Accurast is really building a serverless approach that can run on phones. It can use the Google's TPU acceleration, the AI acceleration chip. And we think that's going to be really interesting. That's something I'm watching very carefully, especially from a cost per compute standpoint, because we could see compute costs that are just insanely small.
Yeah, when we had the Accurast team on the podcast, that was one of the things that was a huge standout. That like their ability to deliver the services at a fraction of the cost, and you're leveraging devices that you already have sitting around that maybe have a cracked screen that you're not using anymore. That's super powerful because you've got, as you mentioned, all these powerful chips just essentially sitting there collecting dust. And being able to leverage that in this decentralized compute model is super fascinating. And it's really interesting to hear that you guys are exploring the partnership world with how that Nodle will work within Accurast and vice versa.
Yeah, and on the topic of dust, so I have this concept I call smart dust, where I believe that in just a couple of years, we will have computers that are so small, basically they'll just be floating around in the atmosphere. We start to see this now, like maybe somebody threw out some kind of computer and somebody ran over it and you'll see it on the street. We begin to see Bluetooth beacons be put all over the environment around us. And that stuff's only going to get smaller and more powerful and cheaper. And very quickly we'll be immersed in a world where it's literally there'll be trillions of little tiny computers all around us, probably floating around the atmosphere. And that's just going to be a really interesting paradigm.
That's going to be so exciting. Gosh. I'm really thrilled about all the traction and success you guys had, and then all the future applications that are going to become coming into the network. This just sounds like there's so much happening and so much potential, especially that you have all these users and then the network is built out the way it is.
I'd say we're just coming out of the trough of disillusionment, if you know the different tech bubbles. We're coming out of the trough of disillusionment. we're not completely out yet, but there's really a need for this stuff. And all the people that we're meeting are so excited about it. So it's just the beginning. So I would say definitely check out the Nodle app if you want to be a node, and then check out the Click Camera app, which is one of the first kind of native applications built on top of all this. And I think you'll like it. It's a really cool product.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have the Nodle app on our DePIN Pulse site for people to go and check out. We'll be sure to link all those other apps. By the way, with the Click app, do you get paid in crypto when you take a photo? Is that how that works?
Not today.
Okay.
What we actually do, we actually comp the transaction fees for users. So you can take a picture and it mints it as an NFT. So
Okay,
you
cool.
can select ones, you swipe to sign, and then it mints those photos as an NFT. And we think that's just cool. It's like almost like an old film app, basically, where you're actually minting as an NFT. And we are working now on ways that you could sell these photos. Say you list these photos and have these photos be purchased as an NFT, but even more so by news agencies. So we've been having a lot of discussions with news agencies and the people that are buying photos in unique parts of the world to say, hey, could photographers make money capturing content of just action happening around them? And you have almost like a decentralized photojournalist network. It's cool. I don't know if it's a big revenue driver, but it's certainly cool to think about.
That is super cool. Well, considering that you've got companies like TMZ out in the world that seem to make a bunch of money on just taking photos of celebrities going to Starbucks or whatever it is, I'm sure that there's better use cases in a decentralized way that can rise the rising tide for all participants, which is phenomenal. Garrett, I'm really excited for all the traction and coming out of the trough of disillusionment. You guys are certainly on a path, really big things. Obviously, you've gotten all these users. It's now all the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come into place. I really appreciate you coming on, getting a chance to share it. This has been really fascinating to learn about everything you guys have going on.
Thanks, Tyler. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we'll wrap it up here. Please go check out the Nodle app. It is free to download. It just runs on your phone. You get paid in crypto. It's great to be able to have. We do have that listed again on DePIN Pulse. We will list all the other Nodle information, website, socials in the description as well. But Garrett, we wanted to say thank you so much, and we'll see everybody on the next one.
Thank you.
Take care.